What up, everyone? DJ Anubis
and DJ Neko
here with you on the Metal Type Radio podcast, doing another movie review. Just got out of the theater seeing Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and it's directed by James Gunn. The cast of the show is pretty much the same as it's always been: Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, and so on. But there are some other actors and actresses in this movie that I'm just going to speak on real quick because they're playing major characters throughout the film. Some we've seen before, like Sean Gunn, who plays Kraglin. We talked about it on the way home. That
every time I see Sean Gunn, he was in Gilmore Girls, and his name was Kirk, and he was just like this really kooky guy. And I'm like,
and he's still kooky.
Yeah, he's still kooky. But we were watching another show last night, and he was in it. And I'm like, he talks, and all I think of is Kirk. Like, and he wasn't being kooky; he was being
kind of serious.
Yeah, kind of serious, like serious comedy, not kooky comedy. But it was funny.
But his character arc is a lot more
developed
in this in this film. So, but it has ties in, of course, to the first film.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm gonna butcher this guy's name, but not on purpose. Chukwudi Awuji, who is playing the High Evolutionary. He's our main villain in this. Will Poulter, who we might have known from movies like Rambo, Son of Rambo, which is like a indie film years ago. He was much younger. He plays Adam Warlock. And then Lila, which I discovered through this, who has the voice of the otter, or the name of the otter, is voiced by Linda Cardellini.
Was that Linda Cardellini? Because I saw her name in the credits, like at the beginning, and I'm like, I don't know which one was Linda Cardellini. So. And
then, of course, this is a picture of Lila here.
She's so cute.
And then Ayesha, who's actually performed by Elizabeth Debicki. She plays Adam Warlock's mother, and we saw her apparently in the second one, which I don't remember. So like that's how forgettable the second film was for you and I think. But she did a pretty good job in this too. I really liked her character for the moments that she was in it. So the plot of this is still reeling from the loss of Gamora. Peter Quill rallies his team to defend the universe and one of their own, a mission that could mean the end of the Guardians if not successful. And basically, what this movie broke me. And like we'll get into a lot of that here soon. But Gamora, the other version of her that we saw at the end of Endgame, she is now a Ravager. She's become what Peter Quill used to be, and she travels around with these like mercs or whatever they are.
And remember what happened to Gamora with the Death Stone.
Mm-hmm.
So Soul Stone, excuse me. Somehow, other Gamora got into this plane, and it's just been very confusing.
Yeah, because she has no memory of Quill or anybody outside of Nebula who has that tie-in with her because
they're sisters,
right? But even she, by the end of the film, has like this kind of growth a little bit. We're not going to get into spoilers, so I can't give you all the endings and things that happen there with that. But what I did not expect with this, like I've been reading about it being emotional and all this other stuff. Like, I don't think I went into it exactly expecting the plot line, because the major plot here is Rocket's backstory, and it deals with him being experimented on by the High Evolutionary, who wants to create this perfect race of beings. Doesn't matter if they're animals or just humans, but he wants to make them perfect to where they can invent things. And while doing that with Rocket as a baby, Rocket was the only one to really develop a brain to create and invent stuff.
But that's the only one that he ever got to evolve that way.
But because Rocket's like this, he's got like little pieces of metal on,
and stuff in him. He was an experiment.
So he's not perfect according to the High Evolutionary, who is a real dick in this film. And so we find out that Rocket managed to escape as a baby, not real baby, but just as a kid almost, when he got away, and somehow they've managed to find him again through the Warlock, and that's what kind of kicks everything off, because they're kind of like on this
It's in the ship is
It's like a big head. So you got like Craiglin and just a bunch of other people probably left over from the past wars and stuff. And the Guardians are there kind of like
just living.
to help them build and rebuild stuff. And, everyone's kind of doing their thing. But we kind of open up with Rocket kind of reminiscing about his past, which no one knows about it except for him. And we soon discover that throughout this film. But despite CGI, like it's not horrible. Like the CGI is good, but it really tugs at your heartstrings in this entire film. Like 3 times, I had tears coming down my face. Like you and I are just one of those people that we can watch humans on film die left and right, get tortured, whatever. But watching animals have the same thing happen is just not cool. And the way that they're able to convey the creatures' emotions and how cute they look, it's miserable, just miserable. But I really liked the plot line. It was a cool story. Definitely, each member of the Guardians throughout this film, they kind of go and they start to rediscover themselves, and eventually they're kind of like figuring out they got to kind of do some soul searching of their own. Each one of them, even Nebula, who is almost half human, half robotic, she has moments where she actually shows emotion, which I think early in her life with Thanos, she didn't really have that.
No, she was always like experimented on by Thanos. So,
yeah, Gunn did a really good job with this film. I think the only kind of weird thing that I noticed, and it's not a bad thing, is that every time you have like this emotional run with something with Rocket's story, like they would kind of go to this happy comedic moment, or what they kick up the music, which music in this is awesome. But it almost felt kind of like it just shifted too much to the point that you're still trying to recover from what you just saw. So there is this moment where you have to shift gears again to get back into the exciting part of everything. But that's sort of what James Gunn does. It's the way he directs, and it's not bad enough to hurt the film at all. What all did you think about it?
Well, I don't want to give away too much because it's still a little bit new, right? It's only been a week
or two, yeah.
And I'm sure all the spoilers are out there, but I'm not gonna be one of those people. The one thing that I'm gonna have to say, tiny spoiler, sorry, that really got me was that damn bunny.
Well, that's not really a spoiler because that's in the middle of the film. So I avoid anything at the end. Like the end does a lot of different things, and I don't want to get into that part of
it. We have rabbits, and we had a rabbit that looked and acted very similar to this rabbit that was being experimented on.
It was a lop-ear.
Which they gave like metal spider legs, and it was just.
Yeah, it's like they were doing horrific things to him.
Just to see if they could.
Like a walrus is in there.
And he had like wheels.
Yeah, but their attitudes and their characters were really fun. Like they were really lighthearted. Like as menacing as the rabbit looked, it was one of the cutest ones in there just because of how it acted. Like it just acted like a real friendly bunny. It just didn't look like a friendly bunny.
Yeah, it looked like Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
It was crazy. The movie got me so many times, especially the ending. This is not a spoiler, but like, I really just liked how it looked. Like, everything just looked so good, and there was a lot of action. So.
Well, it should be noted that one of the reasons why the Guardians are having to go into battle or get into altercations is because the initial attack by the Warlock early in the film on Rocket leads them to the point of death. Like they're having to try to save his life. And this is where they kind of discover who his backstory is, there's a codeine in his body and stuff like this. And so they have to go find this cure for him within 48 hours, and that just leads them to the craziest places, and of course a battle with the High Evolutionary, who's now just rediscovered that Rocket's still out there. Like he doesn't call him Rocket, he calls him by his number name. And he's pissed because when Rocket left, he fucked him up pretty bad. But that was kind of the thing that you kind of looked at this early on, like, oh, he's doing these experiments, and then like he's trying to create this perfect utopia, but it wasn't meant for people or critters like Rocket and the Rabbit and everyone else, because they were just the experiments. But Rocket was figuring out stuff that he couldn't believe he was figuring out, and it was pissing off the high evolutionary, who, to the point that he was losing his shit. Like, he even killed his own people at the end.
And he wanted Rocket, like, he wanted dead or
just
alive.
His brain.
He wanted
just
his brain so he could use whatever coding that was in the brain to put into his new species. That's all he ever wanted to do, was just create new species. That was really interesting too.
And and it's just he doesn't really care about like mistakes. So like, he had already kind of sort of restarted building one, and he tried to act like it was a perfect society. But as the Guardians were down there driving through there, they saw it wasn't much different than regular Earth. Mm-hmm. So like they kind of threw that back in his face, and he's like, yeah, well, I'm just going to start over. Like, he had this like God complex. So, as far as like powers and stuff, I think I read that it was smart for them not to make the high evolutionary stronger than Thanos. Thanos was like one of the main.
And I think too, with the evolutionary, you could see how, when you're looking at Rocket's backstory, I think he experimented on himself too, because you could see how different he looked, and the different, like, I don't think it was necessarily powers that he had, but
gear,
he had added gear to himself in order to do things. And you saw, like, when they kind of figured that out, like, oh, we know how to get him this way. And
right. Mm-hmm. So out of the three of the trilogy, as far as Guardians is concerned, this was actually my favorite, despite being a more emotional roller coaster compared to the first two. I do like the first one. The second one was okay, just not as good as the other two. And I think I'm going to give this film a 9 out of 10. It's probably going to make, because, these days, a lot of movies don't make my top 10, as far as like being perfect films. They might be just good films. It just depends. So even though I have a 9 out of 10, it may make my best of by the end of the year. I just don't know. We're only in May, so it's
we're almost halfway there. June will be.
But so I mean, if there's not any other films that come out that kind of like blow this one out of the water, then this one will probably make my top 10 easily. It was really good, and it kind of, considering some of the other stuff we've seen in the Marvel Universe, it's a lot better than
there's been so many. Like, it's been hit or miss, and it's been missed mostly. Like, especially more recently. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really liked the Thor movie. But then I think
Love and Thunder, I think we really kind of like low scored that one.
No, we gave it good scores. But what I'm saying is, I think it's kind of got that. This is going to sound so crazy, because this is going to just prove how old I am and you are, because you'll remember this too. So remember back in the day when they did the blind Coke and Pepsi challenge?
No.
You don't remember that commercial where they'd be like, drink this one,
drink
this one. Yeah. Which one do you like better? And they're like, you like Pepsi better. That's because its initial taste has that like pow, but then you don't want to keep drinking it because it just kind of wears on you. Like, it has enough to make people. Now, some people absolutely love Pepsi more than Coke. I'm more of a Coke person. And when I compare that to Thor: Love and Thunder, I've never watched it since we saw it in the theater.
I know, and I was the same way.
Like,
there were some aspects that I liked of it. There were other aspects I didn't really like, but I didn't like it as much as I like Ragnarok, and I think that was kind of the general feeling you had too.
But for me, like, we laughed and we thought it was cute, and we really liked the story. But I think it's like the Coke and Pepsi challenge. Like, we had that first taste, and then you hear other people's opinions, and then you start thinking back in your head, going, yeah, maybe it wasn't as good as I thought it was, but because it had so much in there, and we just like to be
Well,
entertained.
and that's kind of the thing is one of the biggest complaints about Love and Thunder was you had Christian Bale playing this very serious character who has dealt with loss, and it's like a more darker version of the villain, like almost like what we had the High Evolutionary,
Mhm.
but they allowed that darkness to run its course in this movie. So you got to kind of go on that journey of rockets and feel the emotion, whereas with Bale's character, which I can't remember what they called him, but it's like, oh, okay, he's after revenge now. And then it was more about um, Portman's character and Thor and Jane and all that stuff. But like, it just was convoluted. It tried to use too much comedy when it didn't need it. This one has a nice balance of comedy with the emotion and sadness and the anger. Like I went through most of this film wanting to jump in the screen and strangle the evolutionary. Like that's how much I love animals, man. Like I'm like, I hope that dude gets his just due because like I was so mad at what he was doing to those creatures. And that's people's like it's only a movie, but like that's why you watch movies. You want to be invested. You want to be invested in the plot.
And you want to be entertained too.
Yeah.
Like I've said this before with some movies that we watch, like you will watch certain movies because you're like, this is a feeling and I'm doing this for atmosphere. I don't want atmosphere or a feeling. I want to enjoy the movie, even if the movie is going to make me cry. Like we were, talking about some sad movies, and I don't. They were, how they do the advertisements before the movie, not the trailer, but how they were like, oh, these are great movies to watch for Mother's Day, and one of them was Terms of Endearment. I was like, that is one of the saddest fucking movies.
Is it sadder than Sweet November?
Yes. Actually, it might not be for me because I've never had children, and that's why it was like I was surprised that this was like a Mother's Day because I'll spoil this when it came out in the 70s. The daughter dies at the end horrifically. And Shirley MacLaine at one point is running through the hospital because her daughter is dying of cancer going, why is nobody giving my daughter her pain medicine? Why is my daughter not giving? And she was like flipping, like that is, it's heart-wrenching. Now, granted, I have a mother, so I can completely understand and feel the connection to my mother, but I don't have a kid, so like being the mother grieving over the loss of a child, it's not going to feel the same for me. Whereas in Sweet November, you're grieving the loss of like someone you love.
Right.
But this was a way different. It was like this movie took you through a bunch of loss, and it also still made you feel hopeful.
Oh yeah, yeah,
because,
definitely. And there are, just to know for people who don't know, there are 2 post-credit scenes. We're not going to say what they are, but there are 2 at the end. So if you go to see this, be ready to hang around for a bit.
We always joke at the end of the Marvel movies because there's so many things going on that it takes a huge production crew, and it's like,
oh yeah, dude, it's like a gazillion people working on it.
Names and how many studios and how much editing, and this is our visual person and this is our visual effects person and the sound guy. All right, so I didn't give it a number. This is a tough one. I think for me, I've loved Guardians since, like, I'd never known about Guardians of the Galaxy. They were kind of like
up until the movies, I didn't know anything about them.
And I was always a comic book reader as a kid, but they've been around for a while, clearly, as you can see. And there's lots of stories that they can pull from or evolve from, and that's the beauty about Marvel. They've been around for so long that they can kind of pull different stories and work the comic book story arcs in, like was it the Thor movie? It was Ragnarok, wasn't it? The one where it was Hulk?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was actually a Hulk comic.
Hulk Planet or something.
Yeah, and
Planet
Thor
Hulk
wasn't there. But see, anyway. So when I first saw Guardians, I was just super excited. That's why I held the first one in such high esteem. I loved the blend of the music. I loved, like, the story. There's a lot of loss in the beginning of the first one too. Like
Mhm.
Guardians is a pretty deep. You know, they said the F-bomb in this movie. I couldn't believe it. So Guardians is a little bit more adult versus, and that's, I just kind of fell in love with them. Now I'm almost half tempted to go and see if I can find like old story arcs and read up about them.
Yeah.
But that's why the first one, I always kind of feel like, you know, but the third one was a tremendous movie. It's way better.
Yeah.
The second one is not bad. It's just like the
Now, if I had to, like I said, I'd give this one a 9. I'd give the first one an 8, and I'd give the second one maybe a 7. So there's not like, it's not like it's.
I would say the same too. I think I just didn't. The story in the second one was not as
engaging.
Yes. And who directed the second one? Did you look that up?
Because I don't remember. I'm not sure Gunn did them all or not. But James Gunn, like, I would say no, just because the second one doesn't have
his feel.
Right, exactly, and that's why I think it's not him on the second one.
Because
the second one.
He directed the Suicide Squad,
mm-hmm.
and that feels like this movie too. It has his touch on it. You can tell.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's our review, and I do recommend to go see it. It's very good. It's getting a lot of high marks on both audience and critics on Rotten Tomatoes, so that's always a good thing. Mm-hmm. So go out and check it out, and hit the like button, subscribe button for us, please. Share our review if you like, to kind of give others an idea of what's going on with this film, and then we'll see you next time, and have a good weekend.